Now in an earlier video, I put this hat on right here. And now to go along with this, we've got a lot more of the costume to work on, and that's what this giant tangled mass of, well, it's an ammo belt for a Minutemen from Fallout 4. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. This is probably going to be my Halloween costume as well as convention cosplay for the next year or so. So let's get started with building this thing. So the core of the ammo belt and the sash is going to be this material here. It's 2-inch wide nylon webbing. You can pick this up at a whole lot of just fabric stores. And your first step is going to be to figure out how much of this needs to go around your waist as a belt. So let's start there. So that's about exactly how much it needs to go around my waist. But of course, there's one of the things you got to take into account. Primarily going to be wearing a coat in the final costume here. So I want to add 14 inches onto this length. So we're at 18, add 14 inches, go down to 4. So this should be more than enough here for the ammo belt portion. So let me cut that off. Then, using some safety pins up here, I'm going to go ahead and basically temporarily put this belt on me. This is where you don't stab yourself with safety pins. They're called safety, but that doesn't mean I know how to use them without causing trouble. I don't think I've ever actually bought a thing of safety pins in my life. You get 4 of them every time you run a 5K or 10K or half marathon race. So these are a good chunk of the ones I've saved up over the past few years for all the races I've ran. So on the topic of racing, if you ever noticed, I do frequently wear usually the various shirts I give for these races because they're more or less free, and if I ruin them, I don't really care. But I've got the belt on right now, so now I need to figure out the length of the sash. So I'm going to be using more of the 2-inch nylon webbing here. In case you were curious, for someone my size, I'm 5'9"-ish. I bought 3 yards of this, so about 9 feet, and that's probably more than enough. So I'm using more safety pins to more or less attach the sash where I think it should go to the belt, because I am going to affix the sash to the belt. So there's a little bit of a difference from, say, the actual character of the Minuteman General, for example. So I'm doing my own version of the Minuteman. And then I'm going to run the belt, the nylon webbing up here over my shoulder, and I'm going to pull it down to approximately the same place on the belt, but obviously on my back. So now I can use a silver Sharpie to try to mark this nylon strapping behind me where I can't see it. This is going to end well, I bet, won't it? Hey! I got it on the material, though albeit on the wrong side of the material. And oddly enough, the sash is actually a lot longer than I thought it would be, so I'm basically just barely going to have enough material, which kind of blows. Now what happened was I thought I had enough of this stuff in terms of buying it, but I apparently needed about 1 more yard. So 3 yards is probably not long enough. You probably want 4. Yeah! Let's call this planning ahead. Or maybe dumb luck. But anyway, this giant piece of the 2-inch nylon webbing here, I actually got this for the marine armor I've been slowly building for over the past year or so. I really should get back to working on that. But for now, I can use it for the Minuteman. So I'm going to use this. And now the problem, though, is I don't have a buckle for the main belt. Now, I thought I had one. I'm pretty sure I went ahead and when I got this stuff for the marine armor, I bought one for it, but I don't know where it is at the moment. So, and there you go. Dumb luck strikes again. Here's the buckle. I knew I bought one with that belt material. So let's get back to building the Minuteman ammo pouch thing here, whatever I'm calling it. For this other piece here, all I really need is about 5 more inches of this material. So I'm just going to measure off 5 inches and then cut it off. And this is going to be used as a wrap to kind of hold the excess lengths in place, kind of like as you have on a normal belt, for example. So right around there is about 5 inches. And then let me take this and I'm going to cut it in half. So I'm going to end up with 2 1-inch. No, let me actually make 2 of those. So I'm going to have 2 5-inch pieces. It'll look better that way. So now let me get my belt off here. That sounded very, very awkward, but you know, it's what we're building right now and I'm still wearing it. So what I need to do is turn this into a faux leather type of setup. So let's get these things out of the way. And I've got some faux leather material Is it called pleather? I don't know what it's called. It's some sort of fake leather-like material, but obviously it doesn't have the durability of leather, and that's why we're using this nylon webbing as a core. I have all that material. Where did I put it? Problem solved. It's all right behind me. I do that a lot, where I have like something in the toolbox behind me here, but I don't know I put it there, so I look everywhere else but there. What I need to do is cut this material here into 3.5-inch long strips. I want to make them as long as possible. If I make them as long as possible, if I don't have enough to completely cover a single thing of this nylon webbing in one piece, I can find ways to cleverly hide them with ammo pouches and things like that, or hide the seams. So that's about 6 feet right there. No, that's 4 feet. I can't add. 2 feet plus 2 feet is 4 feet. Oh my God. 6 feet. Must have been thinking 3.5 plus 3.5 equals 6, which is wrong also. Anyway, unless you plan to win a major convention, cheating is perfectly acceptable in cosplay stuff. And frankly, you usually save you, well, on paper it'll save you time. I don't know if it actually will in the real world. Usually when you cut corners in cosplay, you end up regretting it later, because it seems like a good idea now. So you probably shouldn't actually listen to me when I'm talking about this, but you know, it's not as if my costumes routinely fall apart, or... The ghost armor held up all right. I didn't really have any problems with the ghost... Oh wait, no, the helmet almost snapped off, and it ripped my hand open, but okay. I'm gonna stop talking now. Let's get back to measuring. So if I did my counting right there, which is questionable, there should be 5 of these strips. Let's cut them out using my roller cutter. The right way, the wrong way, the max power way, and then there's the Jason Rutherford way. Got 10 feet of this fake leather material cut out. Now we got to sew this onto the nylon webbing. So using a bunch of sewing clamps, I'm wrapping the fake leather around the nylon webbing, and then I'm holding it in place. So the last thing I need to do before I start the sewing process is just mark some sort of sewing line here on the inside so I can follow in a relatively straight line. So I am going to mark it at 3/8 of an inch in. Got my sewing lines marked out pretty good here. Let's get the sewing machine out and run these through it. So now repeat this process but with the 2 little pieces, and I'll work with those a little bit later. There's our belt, there's a sash, and we got 2 little pieces. We'll explain what those are in just a bit. So time to start working on some things here. Let's toss the sash out of the way. I am going to start with the belt. Now we've got to attach our plastic buckle. Faux leather, it's going to end up having to go through that side like that to secure the one end on. Now the other side, we got a little bit of a tricky thing I have to work with. I bet that will work. Okay, we can cheat. Alright, so what I'm doing here, so the problem we have, if you want to normally thread this, at least in my ghost armor, the material comes through the front part of the little loop and then loops back and goes out this way. Problem is, doing it that way, you'd expose the black nylon webbing here to be visible. But if I reverse that to where I have the belt come in the first part loop and loop around and go backwards, I can hide the fact that the nylon webbing is really ugly. I can hide that underneath the other piece and it'll probably look all right. Let me try this on and see how well this fits. So time to do a little bit of sewing to kind of sew this piece off and secure that in place, and this belt part is in good shape. While I have the sewing machine out, I am going to sew these 2 little pieces into some loops. So these small little pieces that I sewed into a loop, you slide those over the belt or the sash or whatever it may be, and they hold the kind of extra piece that's used for tightening and loosening the particular piece of the costume. They hold it in place. Now it's time to move on to attaching the sash to the belt. Hike the belt up, you get ideas of what's going on. It works. Trust me, it works. You have my head's cut off, my belt's up really high, but you can figure out what the heck it is I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to figure out about where the sash needs to be. I'm going to leave maybe, about the right angle, I'm going to leave maybe an inch, 2 inches or so below the bottom of the belt. So let me just kind of clip that in place with a few of my little sewing piece things here, sewing clips, and then you'll see exactly what's going on. Here's our belt. I am going to disconnect these bottom 2 sewing clips, and I am going to wrap the sash all the way around behind like that, and then I'll put them back in place, and we'll find out if my sewing machine can go through 6 layers of fabric. Now, the Minutemen sashes, they have a different type of system for tightening them, and they're kind of a little bit below the level of your chest. So somewhere around here or so, I'm going to have a different type of different type of loop system to kind of tighten this thing up. So I am going to actually make a mark. Where is my silver Sharpie? Back here. I'm going to make a mark on the back of the sash to let me know whereabouts I want that loop to be. So today I tried to find some buckles that would work for something that looks more or less like the Minutemen wear. I got something that's kind of close, but this is some weird double buckle system that probably isn't going to be exactly what I want. So I'm just going to take some brass rod here and bend it around with some pairs of pliers until it's in a shape that I like. And this stuff can snap if you bend it too much, so definitely be wearing some safety goggles. So I drew a line here that's about more or less where I wanted the buckle to go. Now I need some material above that that's going to fold down and hold basically the buckle in place, just like how this thing is held in place with some material. So let me cut the sash about 1 inch or 2, probably like 2 or 3 inches above that line. Now the problem is, folding it over, we've got this middle bar here in the way. So what I'm going to do, before I put the buckle on, let's fold this piece over, and I'm going to cut a slit in the middle here. It's about, maybe 1/4 of an inch wide. D shape faces downward on all the Minuteman characters. Clamps down on this thing, and we'll sew it up. Oh, wait. I haven't sewed the bottom yet. I got lucky there. I'll take it. Okay, let's sew this part of the sash. We're going to sew that onto the belt. So let's talk about getting the back of the sash on the belt. It's going to be basically the same procedure as the front, but you're going to be doing it kind of blind or maybe in a mirror. Hey, that's an idea. I'm actually going to go ahead and do that right now and just figure out where it should attach. And you want to attach the sash such that it has, about a 2-inch overlap. Fold it over and we'll sew it on just like we did this piece. Now, because you're going to be attaching the sash by the very end of the fabric over here and folding it around just like that, you've got an extra foot or so up here that when you bring it around to the front, you can do the proper sizing as expected, and we'll deal with that in just a little bit. So I used a mirror to attach as best I could. Now let me clean it up a little bit. Okay, cleaned up. Let's sew it up. Front part and the back part of the sash are on. Let's try this thing back on and figure out just exactly how I'm going to tighten this thing up. I have to punch a hole somewhere in here to get it to the right tension. I need to figure out where exactly I want the hole to be punched. So I could almost probably use this, the rod itself with the brass rod's pretty sharp, so I could probably almost use that. But I just kind of poked a little bit of a tension right there. All right, so let's go to where the hole should be and then just punch right through everything. Pop. So of course a different kind of loop setup here would probably be a good idea, but I'm trying to get to look more or less like the actual Minutemen sash. And I think it does pretty well. It doesn't seem to want to pull apart right now because now they've tucked it in like that. And I think that'll work. Now let's talk about adding some interesting details to this piece. So right here, this of course is a 3D printed version of the radio the Minutemen carry on them. And this is an incredibly simple project you can take on if you want to do some Blender modeling. You can see the 3D model right now here on the screen. And what it comes down to is, in terms of how this is modeled, about 99% of what you need to know comes from the tutorial that I did a little bit ago on building custom Warcry bases. So I've taken some bases for miniature wargaming. The same techniques can be used to make a costume piece just like this. So let me slide this on the sash and see how it looks. So the design of my attachment on the back is a little bit janky. I probably will modify it a little bit, but more or less it works, and that's pretty much how the Minutemen carry their radio. In fact, it probably sits up a little bit higher like that. But more or less, there's a Minutemen radio there, ready to call in for some support, artillery, whatever it may be. Actually, you know, in Fallout 4, playing as the Minutemen, I never actually used the artillery feature. I probably should have sometimes, but I never did for some reason. Anyway, now a few more things you got to deal with. One, we have this plastic buckle right here, right? So that's not really Fallout very-ish. So it's not really Fallout-ish very much. So what I'm going to do is actually start working on a buckle that's going to be the state of Massachusetts, because it's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts where Fallout 4 takes place, and make that kind of a buckle and kind of go with that whole American cowboy theme. We're normally at the state of Texas. We're working Massachusetts because that's where the game takes place. And that's going to be a very simple 3D modeling, 3D printing job, just like the radio was. The last bit of detail we're adding to our ammo pouch here are going to be actual pouches for carrying things. Now, this is going to be very practical come convention time for holding things like your phone, wallet, and other important things like 18-round Nerf N-Strike Elite stick mags. Okay. We don't need to be carrying those to conventions. In fact, many conventions frown on Nerf weapons these days, unfortunately. But you get the idea, right? So we're going to start here and make some pouches like this. In fact, though, what I'm going to be making mine for on this tutorial is I've got some electronics to go on with this costume. So I want to be able to carry a few replacement LiPo batteries. So I'm going to make several small pouches to go along with the two big ones I already have. But the process of making the small ones is the exact same as the big ones. You just scale things up a little bit. So this piece right here is actually off the costume that sits behind me. It's from the Irregular Special Forces civilian hybrid thing that I used at one point for a short film. That more details than that probably 5 years from now. But what this thing is right here, this is actually one of his prop magazines. It's obviously not a real gun magazine, but it's designed to be the approximate size and shape of one. So what I'm going to do is start by sketching out the shape right here. I don't need to worry about the exact dimensions right at the moment. Now let's kind of formalize things. So for the top here, you want to make it 1.5 inches longer than the width of the pouch in order to get the flap in the right place. So I know I've got 1.25 inches wide, so plus 1.5 inches. It's about 2 3/4 of an inch. Do I have enough room for that? Not quite, but I think 2.5 will probably be enough. So let me just extend this up 2.5 inches. Now we need some flaps to sew everything together. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch flange around the sides and the bottom, but not the top. I should also mention there are several ways to make these pouches. This way is just kind of the way I've chosen to make mine. I'm going to put 3 other links in the show notes to 3 different ways you can make these pouches. Now for the bottom, I know that the pouch is 2 3/4 inches wide, and the bottom needs a 1/2 inch flange on all 4 sides. And so each of the pouches, you're going to need 2 side pieces, a front and a back piece, the difference being the front does not have the flap up here, but only the back does, and then 1 of the bottom pieces. Trace all those out on your faux leather, and then come back and we'll sew it all together. Well, there you go. An entire collection of pieces for the pouches. I've got 3 of them right here. So now it's time to sew them all together. Of course, if you're doing multiple ones at the same time, make sure you don't do what I probably will eventually do and sew the wrong pieces together and screw something up, because I always do that. But what you want to do when it comes to sewing these things together, so for example here, this would be a front piece. You want to sew them such that the 2 good sides are sewn together. So let's see, it's a front bottom, and then here's the bottom. So sew them like this, so its front side is touching front side, and therefore that way the seam will appear on the right side of the piece. Let's just go ahead and sew like, hell, I don't know. It's like, Oh, I don't know, what is it, 8? Let's just go ahead and do the 30 or 40 sewing stitches I need to do. One pouch, 2 pouch, 3 pouches. And I promised you, I didn't screw up at all. Of course not. Okay. We're going to make these things be a little bit more durable in a couple different ways. One, the flap is basically just really thin because it's just a basic piece of material. We want to add a little bit of thickness to it to kind of give a little bit more of that illusion that it's actual leather, because leather, I believe, has a little bit of thickness to it. So what I'm going to do is take some craft foam. We're going to cut out a piece the size of the flap and then sew it on. But we're going to sew it on in a bit of a curved section. So a little bit of a curve like that. So that way I can then cut this flap down to make it curved and make it look a little bit nicer. So that's where this tool is going to come in. I'm going to punch a few holes in these guys, and I'm going to use that to apply some snaps. Then I'm going to close the pouch up and kind of put the flap where I think it should be when it's closed, and then I'm going to jab the marker through the little hole I just punched, and if it, no, okay, let's try that again. I just punched out the little piece of foam that was in there. Let's do that. And that should give me a spot, it's probably hard to see, but it's a tiny little silver spot there where the other side of the snap is going to go. Apparently jabbing down with a silver Sharpie ruins the tip. Oh dear. Oh dear indeed. For the snaps, we're going to put the socket end here, and then the snap end is going to go on top. And a test fit. And pull it apart without breaking something, that's kind of my biggest concern with these things. Now comes the fun time of figuring out how to get these things on the belt. Now before I do this, I forgot one step that's kind of optional. You probably don't need them as much, the little pouches, but maybe the big ones, depending on how you want them to look. There's actually a piece of cardboard down in here, glued to the sides of it, which helped to give it a little bit of a more boxy shape instead of a floppy shape. It's kind of up to you. Whatever you like, you can try that. But if I open this guy up, oh, this is nerve-wracking. Yeah, it's down in the deep pits of darkness, but there is a piece of cardboard down there. Here we are at the last major step of the build, and that's to assemble our 3D printed Massachusetts belt buckle. And for that process, I am going to be using some 2-part 5-minute epoxy. So lay down the epoxy, mix it up, and apply it to the back. Now, you might want to test fit the buckle first on the belt so you know exactly where you want to put your clips. I've already done that, so I want to make sure they go in the opposite corners like this. But it's going to really depend on your particular belt. Our belt buckle should have had plenty of time to dry. The idea is pretty straightforward. Let me bring the actual belt out here. I think it should go, I'm trying to figure out here, something like that. That looks to be the top. Okay, good. It's like, no, I did not screw that up. So if I did this right, this should just slide over the plastic actual belt buckle. And the whole purpose of this is to hide the plastic piece with something that you'll eventually make it look like it's some nice shiny metal. It's big and gaudy, but who cares? It's part of the weird character I'm creating. And I think that'll look pretty good once it's properly finished and, like I said, made to look like some sort of shiny metal. And with that, the basic instruction of the Minutemen pouch is done. Now there's a lot of cleanup we got to do, tons of little threads sitting around here that you can snip off, some weathering, finishing both a 3D printed part here, as well as the radio, do proper painting on that kind of a thing. And then, you know, get it all sizing adjusted, maybe put something inside these pouches to give them a little bit more volume. But those are all little details that aren't really specific to this type of build. This whole mess is good enough for now. So thank you guys all for watching. Once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. Go ahead and hit subscribe here on YouTube to get the latest build videos, whatever they happen to may be, whether it's this or robotics. There I am looking off the side again because I'm looking at Micro Flash, which is sitting on my kitchen table over there. But yes, I got one more video in that series. Otherwise, who knows what I will be working on in the not too distant future. Now, of course, if you saw this and the little bits of hints of the cosplay I've been working on over the past few weeks, you got a pretty good idea what that is by now. But if you don't, you'll be seeing a full tutorial of that build not too far in the future. So once again, until next week, thanks for watching.